Hello and welcome to Ambleford. My name's James and this is
Emily?
and we're on the school bus today and we're going to be talking about what we're going to be talking about.
Today we're going to talk about the effect of the seasons on children and whether we should raise our children in a climate bubble or whether we should send them out there in all weathers and expose them to whatever Mother Nature sends our way.
So as I said, we're on the school bus today and it's been a frosty morning. So we are the 30th of December?
31st.
So New Year tomorrow. So it's been frosty out there. We've just stopped our holiday club for the year. So it was our last session, forest school session of 2025. Looking forward to 2026. Things kick off on the 5th of January. But with the cold weather, obviously comes a lot of challenges for children. I suppose that's why we've chosen today's subject.
Yeah, very much so.
Right, okay. So, what's the title of our subject?
It's about the climate and about whether we should be protecting children from the weather, the elements, keeping them inside, bundled up, wrapped up, or whether actually we are doing them a disservice by doing so and not giving them the chance to explore.
So there's a lot to this subject in that actually are children nowadays too comfortable, and that maybe the weather is part of that. And then there's the element of experiencing seasonal change and how important that might be. I think there's certainly a kind of a mental health and well-being perspective to this. I mean, mental health and well-being is a bit of a buzzword, but actually I think we are increasingly seeing children with kind of anxiety need, school refusal, and from what I've read and I think I've witnessed, a lot of that is down to children just generally being in a constant state of comfort.
Yeah, I think a constant state of comfort and happiness. There's a real emphasis for parents to create this kind of world where their children want for nothing and are happy all the time, are comfortable all the time, and that's a mammoth amount of pressure for any parent, and actually is probably not really doing our children the greatest service.
And because they exist in such a narrow band of, I suppose, emotional and physical comfort, tolerance is probably the right word. When they are pushed or taken out of that comfort, there's almost like an allergic or phobic response to it. It's almost like a fear of discomfort, and I certainly see extreme versions of that where there seems to be seems to happen in girls slightly more. I find, I don't know what your experience with that is, but I see a lot of girls that have almost kind of a regressive emotional response to any form of discomfort, whether that be social, physical, anything that's going to just take them out of their. Another big one is boredom. Emotional, physical, and I suppose whatever you'd call a kind of a constant sense of being entertained, stimulated state. Anything that's going to take them out of that, they struggle with. And coming back to, I suppose, our original topic, which is the weather, and feeling the gradual response and changes to the weather. I think that's part of that. Actually, I see from, I suppose, the forest school side of our practice. Maybe I see a little bit more of that than you do.
Well, possibly, but I think actually, there's a lot at stake here. The fact that we now live in a global society, which is something which is really probably newest to our generation, that actually when you open up a phone, when you look on the telly, you're not necessarily looking at people who are in an environment which is the same season, temperature, even time of day as you are currently in. And so I think you then have that idea of, well, I want to be in my bathing suit, and actually I want to be doing that, but it's November. So how can I look at that and recreate that, which is what I want to look like, but in my own climate? So I think we've almost kind of got a juxtaposition of where we each are and where we live within the kind of weather and climate that we have, and also the kind of influence that is brought in from, I want to be able to wear my crop top that I got.
Aspirationally, we want to be by a pool in
I think
the sun and.
I mean, who doesn't?
Yeah, okay.
But I think there is that sense of a lot of what we see commercially and social media wise is that kind of lovely tropical, warm t-shirt, sunglasses kind of vibe.
And when it does snow, it's just come the other side of Christmas, so this is very kind of clear at the moment. That, when we do see cold weather, it's a sanitised version. Actually, on site here, it's probably as grim as it gets in terms of the kind of mud and the sludge, and we've predicted snow kind of end of this week, which is great for a day, but beyond that, again, you're left with the deluge of mud and sludge. And, kids get really excited about snow, as they should do. They also get excited about mud and sludge for the first
10 minutes.
10 well, maybe we can stretch them to an hour. But, again, they don't know how to operate sensibly in this weather. So they'll see our mud pit, and first thing they want to do, 9 o'clock in the morning, let's go and slide down. And you kind of go, I'm conscious to never tell children what they can and can't do. What I'll do is I'll say, look, if you go into the mud pit now and you slide on your bottom, you get covered in mud, actually then you're changing your clothes and then you're done for the day. You're going to get cold, wet, your feet are going to get cold and wet, and most times children respond well to that. Sometimes they don't, go, well, actually, the enthusiasm takes over and they learn a very hard lesson. And actually it's important that they do learn that lesson, because you would hope that next time they come, they don't do again. They invariably do. But over time, they'll start to realise that actually they're responsible for their own comfort and or discomfort. Their own... They start to make those decisions for themselves. And actually that's a very important learning journey for children, is to begin to make those learning decisions for themselves. They're so reliant to kind of parental decision making that actually I think we do a lot of good here by kind of expressing quite clearly what the risks and the benefits are to them and letting them make their own choice. There's a level of autonomy. They might regret that choice later, but we're giving them the autonomy, and children invariably respond very well to that level of autonomy, that level of agency that they have over their...
Yeah, and I think it's because it's something that I think a lot of children would agree they very rarely get, is true autonomy over their own surroundings and situation and so on, that actually it's really nice. They generally respond very positively to being given the chance to make their own decisions. And I think it's an interesting fact that, actually our son came home from school and said, oh, it was snowing, but we weren't allowed outside because no one had the right stuff. And I kind of went, oh, it was snowing here while we were at school, and we just dropped everything and went out to go and investigate. And I think that real kind of change in how weather is looked at from an education perspective it really kind of fascinates me, because I kind of think, well, surely there's all sorts of learning that you can do while there's giant snowflakes falling from the sky. You can look at the patterns, and you can look at how they're falling. You can see how many you can count. You can see if somebody can balance one on their finger. It almost crosses every possible topic that you could do. And yet, I think from a health and safety perspective, schools generally kind of go, no, couldn't possibly go out there. Somebody might slip. There might be an injury. We might, the children will get cold. They'll get wet. Then they've got to come back inside. And it's a hassle.
But you miss a valuable learning opportunity, one that actually would, from a learning perspective, be far stickier. Actually, if you go and do some of the outdoor tasks that you're suggesting, actually, the learning from that would stick because it's had a practical application. We've discussed this summer where I went to go and pick our youngest up from school, and it was August time. Well, it couldn't have been August, it was certainly a summer day, and all the blinds were closed to the classroom, and they came out kind of blinking into the sunlight, like they've been in the cinema all day or something. And I was thinking, well, again, what's your excuse for not being outside on a beautiful summer day? It's just that actually your timetable as a teacher on that day says that actually you need to show this presentation at this time, and a whiteboard won't operate in blazing sunshine. And so as a teacher, you're kind of you're tied, because you're tied to, we've got to do this on that day. There's no alternative, whether you like that or not. It's forcing teachers to be less creative. It's taking teaching out of the job.
I think there's a sense that if you take the children outdoors, it's a treat. It's something that is like a reward for having done really well. And I think that that's not somewhere that any of us would want our children to be existing. Actually, the outside world shouldn't be somewhere that is a kind of a special treat. I really think it is as much of a classroom as the four walls and tables and chairs are that most children sit at for 6 hours a day. Actually, there's just as much learning that can go on. And even if it is, well, actually, we've done our input, we've done that whiteboard bit that needed to happen. Why don't we just take our books and go to the school field, and you guys can do the work that you're going to do in your books sat at your chairs, but let's just take it outside.
I can see why it doesn't happen in a classroom, because there's all manner of risk assessments. Actually, you've got a head teacher that can say, well, why did you let them outside in this weather? Because actually, they're wet, or they're cold, or they're too hot, or they've not got sun cream, or I can absolutely, because ultimately, they're answerable to
governors, parents.
Exactly.
Ofsted.
There's too much regulation, which means that schools are kind of hogtied to a very narrow band of delivery. They have to. It comes back to the original point. They have to keep those children at a thin band of comfort. What I enjoy seeing about what we do here is actually seeing those children go through those seasonal changes from kind of summer to autumn to winter to spring, because actually they become part of the natural environment. They see a gradual building of their resilience. You know, I get it that actually children starting with us kind of January, February, you know, you have to take particular attention to them because it's tough. You know, it's hard, particularly the younger ones. You know, we at our holiday club last week we had a 4-year-old boy that you could tell wasn't really used to being outside at all. His level of discomfort, even stepping out the car, and actually we were quite fortunate over the 3 weeks of our holiday club. The sun was shining every day. There was very little rain. It was relatively warm relatively mild for the time of the season, but you could tell that he was going to struggle from the off, and ultimately, you know, he did. But those children that follow the seasons with us, that they've done a summer, they've done an autumn, and then go into the winter. Wowee, they're tough kids. You know, they do not care. They do not complain. They know how to dress themselves. More important, parents know how to dress them actually because they've been through it. They've also had to learn how to navigate their children through seasonal change. And it's interesting that kids that aren't used to being outside, actually they'll come on site looking like the Michelin Man, you know, with the gloves and the hat and the scarf like that, and you know the boots with the insulated linings, which are completely ridiculous because once they're wet, they're dead for the rest of the day. You know, a lot of this clothing is highly inappropriate and kind of overkill for really some of the weather that we actually experience in this country. The gloves come off within 5 minutes, you know, of them having fun because they can't do anything. Actually, again, during the holiday club, we had kids down to t-shirts again, and
T-shirts and leggings.
and you kind of go, look, you know, I'm looking at you, and I'm feeling cold looking at you, but actually they feel so free in that moment, so unrestricted, so unaware of their own kind of discomfort, that they get rid of the inhibitions of the kind of all this coddled clothing, and that's what it is. That's what we're doing to them. We're coddling them again, aren't we?
Well, yes and no. I mean, I suppose you know there is a point with all of that where actually you then go, actually as a teacher, as a facilitator, your job, I suppose, our job is then to sort of say, actually, we've paused for a minute. It's snack time. It's lunch time. Actually, now is the point before you have your snack that you put your layers back on because you're going to stop. And again, it's that teaching children to listen to their bodies and to say, I can tell you that if you don't listen to me now, in about 5 minutes, you're going to be freezing cold and it's going to be really, really difficult for you to warm up again. So I am going to tell you, you need to put your coat on. If you're going to say to me, no, I don't want to, that is your choice. But actually, you are going to understand that that choice will have a consequence in 5 minutes. And invariably, as soon as they sit down, they chat, they start to have their snack and they're like, I'm cold. Well, yes, because I told you to put your jumper on or your coat on. And then they'll go and do it because they understand that decision has had a consequence that isn't very comfortable.
But there's also some important learning there in that actually they recognise that when they're active and they're moving, their body naturally heats up. You know, the difficult children from a cold weather perspective are those children that kind of go, oh cold, and they won't move. You can't say, well, look, let's just get active. no, I'm too cold, and they'll want to go and sit by the fire, and that's well and good. But actually, you're almost always better off just getting involved.
Oh, that's when a good old song and dance comes into play.
Well, maybe that's your department.
But that's the thing, and actually, I remember teaching PE at lots of different levels. And, you would kind of go, okay, well, today we're going to learn about how our body works. And to get our heart rate going, we're going to do some star jumps. And you sort of think, okay, well, yes, that is definitely one way to raise your heart rate and to understand. But actually, why not, when they've finished doing something that they were just doing, kind of go, actually, are we hot? Are we moving? Can we feel our heart? So I think it's the sort of segregation into things stops that cross understanding, actually understanding that you're cold and that you can get warm by making your heart pump faster, feeds into science and learning about the circulatory system, and and then all of a sudden you've got conversations, you've got learning that has come organically.
It's even more basic than that, though. That actually, they're learning in that moment how to look after themselves. They're kind of understanding how they exist in the world and how they need to adapt themselves to be more comfortable. So the kids that I see that we take through a full season, actually, I'm confident that we'll get them through a grim February day. And yeah, look, not every day is wonderful weather here. We have torrential rain, which is probably the worst that we have to deal with. High winds. We have some grim days here, and we have to batten down the hatches a little bit. We'll be going into the roundhouse and putting fires on and making sure everyone's comfortable. We're not a survival. This isn't a Bear Grylls or anything. That's not what we're trying to do here. Actually, what we're trying to do is kind of let children experience the seasonal change. See the leaves fall off the tree. I make it I make a point at the beginning of every term with our term time classes to kind of go, okay, well, what have we noticed? What's the change since we were last here? Because actually those half terms provide a generally a big enough gap to kind of go, oh yeah, everything looks a bit different. Well, why does it look different? What resources are out there now that mean that there's certain things that we can do and we can't do anymore. So obviously this time of year the veg gardens closed down, but actually perhaps it makes us think about the types of things that we should be buying to eat from the shops, things that are in season now, the things that we're shipping from Egypt or Morocco and so on and so forth. And actually, should we be eating strawberries this time of year? Probably not, because they really don't taste of anything anyway. They're shipped halfway across the world, and there's a delight in eating a August strawberry, like a June.
So I think when it comes to the weather, there is that sense of children, and I think adults need to be outside. I think that loss of connection and loss of ability to kind of connect with actually what's going on is huge. We live in houses which are purposely very good at keeping the warm in and keeping the wind and the rain and the cold out. And that has kind of led us, I think, as humans over the generations to do the same. We look for spaces that are warm and dry and not drafty, and it means that we potentially miss out on very kind of exciting and novel kind of experiences, because we would have to go somewhere that might be a little bit uncomfortable. And I think we as a kind of as a place, as a business, as a whatever, want to kind of make sure that that is put back into people's lives, that you can be a little bit uncomfortable and reap the benefits of that.
But I mean, as a you know, I think I'm outside probably 80% of the time all year round, as we probably are as a family, really. And actually, there's nothing better than coming in out of a cold, blustery day and, you know, getting the fire on and making it comfortable. And actually, you know, there's something really lovely about that. But I think that once you are outside that amount of time, you'd be surprised in the UK how few really bad days we actually have weather-wise. You know, you I don't think, and I don't want to be in a position to patronise anybody, but actually, when you do spend a lot of time outside, there are very few days that you think, well, I can't handle this. Very few.
And that's more wind
Yeah.
than it is rain or snow or
Absolutely.
whatever else. The wind is the bit that really knocks
I
us.
think that's right. I think the wind and rain in combination is a killer, really. It's
Even that though, the kids love
Yeah.
going out, and I
Send
think
them
again
wild,
it's
yeah.
that sort of ability to go, okay, here is your warm, dry space. You can go to this point. At this point, we know you're still safe. Nothing's going to blow onto you or fall on you or whatever else. Go out, see what it feels like, see what it does to your hair, see what it does to your face, and then come back in and understand that movement, that kind of ability to choose where you are, actually is a really powerful thing. And again, because I think most kids never get the chance to do that. You know, parents, teachers, everybody sort of sees wind and rain and kind of goes, no, we should stay in the car, we should stay at home, we should stay here. And we shouldn't experience what's going on. And that, I think, is a real shame, you know, because there is real joy in experiencing extreme weather if it's done with care, within a kind of a risk assessed situation.
I mean, I think all the children that come to us regularly have developed that level of resilience and have the understanding of how to manage their own comfort levels in this weather, and that's great. New kids that come in, particularly this time of year, look, actually, we treat them maybe slightly differently. You know, there's a different benchmark, and we understand that. I get that. Actually, if you're not used to it and you come on a day where it's howling with wind and rain, actually, your bed sounds like a better option at some points. But you know, but I think it's wonderful, those children that come to see us regularly, and they have the most fantastic days with us on those days that you wouldn't normally want to venture out in. Yeah. So, is there a take-home message to any of this?
I think probably more than anything that actually the great outdoors isn't something to be frightened of, and actually in whatever way is just a sort of a small push for you, getting outside and exploring a little bit and just pushing your own zone of comfort can give real kind of positive benefits, even if it is appreciating coming home to your nice toasty house just a little bit more.
I think that's right. But actually, you know, ultimately there's a far greater danger in making your children too comfortable. You know, the fallout of a child that isn't pushed, isn't in a position to ever be tested. Those children are not the adults that we want in the future. They're not children that society need. We need to start building resilience of children, and sometimes it might seem that it's not cruel, but it's being what's the word? This way you help me with the word.
I don't know what you're trying to say.
Well, I'm trying to say we're not trying to be cruel. We're not trying to say, right, get out into this wind and rain. We're not trying to make them feel uncomfortable unduly. It's actually just gradually pushing their limits. And it's that gradual testing of their limits, expanding their boundaries, experiencing...
Comes back to tolerance. And actually the window of tolerance that actually everybody has is very, very different. And if we as humans continue just to kind of we go to the edge of our window and just have a look outside and see what's further away, and actually that window of tolerance then can mean that we can potentially access things that we wouldn't believe that we could.
Actually, before we wrap this up, there's kind of another strand to this, at the risk of extending this conversation even further. But actually, the idea that we are distancing ourselves further from our kind of animal, natural selves, putting ourselves in unnatural environments, is part of the rise in this kind of societal anxiety, mental health. As doctors are starting to prescribe things like gardening and walking over and above kind of medication, there's an increasing research into the idea of being outside being increasingly beneficial, exponentially beneficial to your mental health, your depression, your anxiety levels. And certainly, there's massive increases in childhood anxiety, and I think that part of that is not being always under artificial lights, or in school being under artificial, going home and being under lights and blue lights from screens and things like that. It's not a natural place for us to be as kind of...
Sounds like the next podcast is coming.
Oh, so that's time for us to wrap up.
I think that's time for us to wrap up.
Fine. So if you enjoyed this conversation, then please subscribe to whatever format you're viewing or listening to this, and we'll try and produce a few more of these in the future, and I'll look forward to seeing you soon.
Ambleford out.